we're going to talk about these. These are the two Heroines light novels that are, created by Eiichiro Oda, written by Jun Asaka, and illustrated by Sayaka Suwa. Might be familiar with these, might not. May have also heard that there is going to be an animated version of one of these. So these books are made up of different little vignettes, little chapters about each of the different One Piece girls, not every single one of them, but a lot of the major ones, going and doing something in their kind of day-to-day life. So this first one has stories centered around Nami, Robin, Vivi, Perona. And then there's like the bonus one that's also about Nami. So there's like 4 in this one, in the first volume, and in the second volume has, who is in the second volume? We got Hancock, Tashigi, Reiju, Uta, Nami, and then Robin. Again, so, fun little artworks and fun little stories about each of them, not in the middle of a battle or in the middle of a huge decision that's being made or something like that. Just them kind of being them in day-to-day life. And, some of them take place, Nami's in this one clearly takes place post-time skip. Some of the other ones, Robin's takes place during the time skip because Sabo, Koala, and Hack are there. I haven't read all of them yet. I think Vivi's takes place during the time skip, or sometime it's after the Straw Hats leave and stuff like that. Koza's in it. There's several other cute things. Perona's is like during the time skip. It involves Mihawk, and I think Zoro is there as well. Stuff like that. And it's just these cute little stories about each of the different, a lot of the different major women in the One Piece world. Hancock's, I believe, goes into a little bit more of some of the day-to-day life on Amazon Lily, different things like that. So I'm going to be kind of doing a series, and this is going to be a bit more of a sporadic series based around timing of other things, where I'm going to talk about each of the different chapters, each of the different stories that go along with the different heroines. So this first one is going to be about Nami, hers is The Shoe Must Go On, which is essentially Nami goes and gets a really expensive pair of shoes and then robs a store blind. I'll get more into that in a second. And so I'm going to read through each of the chapters, make notes about them, all that type of stuff, and then essentially just go through and kind of explain through it. Kind of similar to the way that I do like chapter reviews, except a little different in the fact that, there's not a lot of direct quotes to a degree that I'll be pulling from. There's a couple that are pretty good. The chapters reference, different things that'll get brought up, that are just referencing to the other crew members or other friends that they've had or the person's past, stuff like that. It also just gives you a glimpse into some stuff of the outside world. So we'll get going on Nami's. I'm not reading the book out loud. I'm not gonna audiobook this thing. I'd probably get in trouble if I tried. So essentially, Nami's story, The Shoe Must Go On, starts off with Nami and the crew have stopped off on this island that is essentially home to, it's like the global frontier on fashion and everything else like that. So essentially, this island is meant to be this place where designers, models, actresses, actors, possibly singers, different things like that have not all come from these islands, but tries to make it big on this island. It's influencer island, if you would. The island never gets a name, but it's essentially influencer island. And what ends up happening is Nami is walking through the streets, and she is trying to find her way to this very famous shoe store called Lebno Lisaka. Sorry, some variation of a, I'm sure it's a very fancy name. Essentially, it's this world's version of Louis Vuitton. It's the One Piece world's version of the French designer Louis Vuitton and his famous stilettos with their shiny red lacquered heels, soles and stuff like that. Is essentially where, this world, this is what this is based on. So the crew have stopped off at this island. We get no real reference. Jinbei is not mentioned to be part of the crew, so assumedly this is before Jinbei is part of the crew. Also, all of these were written over the course of a couple of years and then just compiled. They were like released weekly or released every so often in like the One Piece magazine. So they would, come out occasionally in the magazine. And Jinbei only recently, I say recently, Wano was 4 years ago in the manga when Jinbei finally became a member of the crew. Take your pick. So Nami's going through the streets. She ends up having to get directions to this shoe store. And the guy who ends up giving her directions as she walks away just realizes how beautiful she is and thinks that she could have been an actress or a model or something like that. And I mean, we all know that Nami is beautiful. We all know that Robin and Vivi and all these other women and stuff like that are beautiful. Tashigi is beautiful. Hancock is considered the most beautiful woman in the world, all of this other stuff. And it is kind of this thought of a lot of these beautiful women are pirates in this world. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. And what ends up happening is, so Nami ends up making her way to the shoe store. We find out a little bit later that she had been at the shoe store earlier that day, bought this super expensive pair of shoes that she had specifically cleared out space in her closet because she has to be very careful. This is one of the references to the fact that Nami has to be careful how much she carries with her on the ship, how much of personal belongings and stuff like that she has on the ship. I mean, her and Robin have their own room separate from the boys and separate from the guys, and Nami and Robin probably have their own closets. And we know that out of the Straw Hats, Nami and Robin are the two. Specifically, Nami is probably the one that has the most amount of clothes. We see her buy clothes very often. We saw her buy clothes in Logetown, and then we saw her buy clothes later on at Fishman Island from Papagoo. And that's also implied to be not just clothes for her, but also clothes for a lot of the rest of the crew at that point in time, because someone's gotta, Sanji's fine. Sanji can get his own clothes. Usopp is probably fairly self-sufficient on having to get his own clothes. Robin, definitely. Someone had to buy clothes for Nami, for Luffy and Zoro, or else, they're Luffy and Zoro. Okay, so I'm sure Zoro is aware of the fact to buy new clothes at times. But, someone has to get clothes for some of the others every now and then. So, because they may not think about it necessarily. And what ends up happening is Nami gets into this, Nami had been to the store earlier in the day, and she's, found these shoes, really, really wanted them, specifically wanted to go to this store to get this brand of shoes, these Lebno shoes. And I apologize for mispronouncing the name, I'm sorry. And what ended up happening is she bought the shoes, brought them back to the ship, was showing them off, and we have these reactions from the rest of the crew. Is Nami's kind of thinking back on this. We have the reactions from the rest of the crew. Robin, of course, says that they are very cute. Called them very pretty. Sanji is fawning all over her. Frankie says that the shoes are good quality material. The fabric and the jewels and stuff that are used on the shoes are very good quality material. Usopp is just shocked at the price. Brooke thinks that they make her legs look good because he's Brooke. Luffy, what do you think? Luffy's not paying any attention. He's on the Sunny's figurehead. And Zoro teases her about running in them. About her having to run in the shoes. And Nami put thought into this, because what ends up happening is Nami got these shoes specifically because the tagline that she had heard for the shoes so many years ago was that they were heels you can run in. And Nami even thinks about this, and we kind of have her internal monologue about this where she's thinking, well, I live on a ship, a pirate ship specifically, but a ship where we're at sea, and she needs to be able to, at a moment's notice, jump up and be able to run around the ship and do whatever she needs to do to help steer the ship, mess with the riggings, all this other stuff. So she needs to be able to do that. She also takes into consideration that she is also in battles a lot. The Straw Hats end up in battles a lot. They are pirates. This figure specifically has Nami in heels. High heels, to be specific. I wonder if they're a reference to this or not, for what happens. We'll go over that. But what ends up happening is, Nami is thinking about the fact that it was just like, well, that's why she specifically went after that brand, because they were heels she can run in. She needs heels, comfortable heels that she can run in when it comes to working on the ship or even in the middle of battle. And I actually kind of went through and tried to see if I could find that many pictures of show Nami's footwear in other battles. We see her in, like, she's kind of got like those typical kind of like brownish type sandal heels that we see her in a lot throughout the first part of the series. And then we see her in like basic heels a bit later on, I think post time skip. But we don't really see her in like these high-end fashion heels all that often. They get kind of thrown in a bit in like cover pages, specifically color spreads. Sometimes they get thrown in for like, the promo art for the movies, or where they're in like the fancy outfits for, for gold or film, for film gold, or, stuff like that. Where they're in like the really fancy outfits and things like that. But there's not really that many of those that aren't just like, Oda drew her in pretty outfit for whatever reason, so she's in really fancy heels. And Nami wanted those shoes specifically because she could run in them and because she needs them that way on the ship. Unfortunately, she's worn the shoes for about 10 minutes and her feet are already killing her. And because she can't suck it up and admit that Zoro was right, because she's Nami, she marches back to the store and essentially confronts... Okay, Nami does not do this in a mean way. We've seen Nami deal with salespeople before. If they're ones that she's not familiar with, she tries to be rather polite with them, and it depends on the circumstances. We see her get in there, and she ends up talking to Miucha, who is the sales girl, and she's also one of the craftsmen women who make the shoes. And Miucha is kind of described as this very plain but pretty girl. She's not like the over-the-top model type person, type of thing. But she clearly is very good at her job because she's one of the craftswomen who makes the shoes. And so she works both like up front and in the back, and she's still dressed nicely. And at one point in time, and I'll probably reference this later, we do get a reference at one point in time to the fact that her hands have like, little nicks on them, or they have like stains on them from using the different types of tools and materials that she needs to use in order to make the shoes, to show that she does know what she's doing. There's a lot of detail paid to her in this story, so in this little adventure that Nami goes on. So, and we kind of switch from Nami's perspective to Miucha's perspective at one point. Or a couple of times. Swap back and forth. So what ends up happening is Nami asks Miucha, I was like, well, can I get these? Can I get like a refund? Or these must be a defective pair of shoes, like a showpiece or something like that, because, blah, 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 blah. And Miucha looked over the shoes and she's like, no, these are the right shoes. These are what they're supposed to be. They're not a demo pair or something like that. And Nami's like, but what about your motto about like shoes you can run in? What about the slogan for the brand? And she's like, oh, that's our old slogan. Now it's more just, the brand has moved on from being these very beautiful, still high-end fashion shoes that are functional to essentially being like the stereotypical type of heels that are just like, screw the fact that your feet hurt, you're wearing a house on your feet type of thing, for how expensive some of these shoes are. And that applies to a lot to like what happens in our world. That's one of the reasons I never want to wear heels. I can't even walk in heels. Trying to get me in heels is just like, why are you doing this? And I don't need my ankles broken. Sorry, not happening. Um, and, you know, like, my nieces like to wear heels, stuff like that. I have lots of cousins that like to wear heels, and I don't begrudge them that. I just look at them and go, yeah, no, not for me. Not for me. And that's probably because also, like, my mom never really wore heels all that much when I was growing up. She certainly doesn't wear them now. And of course, you always hear, like, the stories of just, like, you know, your feet hurt, but you look amazing type of thing. And, you know, so it's like, you know, the more expensive the shoes, the more fancy they are, the more they're going to hurt your feet because reasons. Again, now, I do know that there are, because I know that a lot of designers now do try to make the shoes more comfortable while also be beautiful. But for some, it's more important to have it look good as opposed to have your feet feel good while you're wearing them. And because a lot of people will just suck it up and wear the shoes because they're pretty. That's even one of the things that gets brought up throughout the course of this little story, is that there are so many different women who wear these shoes and are just willing to suck it up because it means that they're wearing these shoes even though their feet are killing them. Because it's like the social status type of thing. And so Miucha is kind of like explaining the Nami about, like, no, these are just, these are the shoes that you bought, and no, we don't do refunds, we don't do exchanges, anything like that. And Nami doesn't like this. She's not happy about that. And so she's trying to figure out what to do here. And we do kind of get a little bit of a history of, like, the shop, which is kind of nice. That the shop was founded or started by Lebno Lachake. Again, I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. Some Italian name. I mean, like, One Piece has a reference to, like, Giorgio Armani in it already. There's I think he's a cat mink who is enslaved. He is enslaved. To the celestial dragons, and he makes the suits that all of the Gorosei wear. It's like Nyornyo Armani or something like that. It's like he's a reference there. So it makes sense that there would be, like, these other characters that are these references to, like, you know, Louis Vuitton and stuff like that. And so he, you know, started the shop several years ago, and eventually, as his popularity and his fame rise, the quality of the shoes in regards to how good they actually feel on your feet drops. So we do get a little bit of a history of that, which is kind of nice. That it's kind of this homegrown business, and that Miucha started working there years ago because she wanted to be able to make shoes that were both fashionable and comfortable. And one of Miucha ends up saying, well, you could just give them to one of your friends. And I love this line from Nami. She's like, I don't have friends who want shoes you can't run in. I love that. Because, of course, Robin wouldn't want the shoes. Same reason Nami doesn't want them. Robin lives on the ship, too. She has to deal with, you know, running around and being able to help with things. Yeah, she has her, you know, her Hana power, so she can make, like, hands pop up and help with that way, which she does. We've seen her do that before, I believe. But, you know, even, like, Nami couldn't just, like, give the shoes to Vivi either, because, like, Vivi wouldn't want to, you know... do that. A side note about Vivi, there is a reference when Nami's looking around at, like, the shoes in the shop. She references a pair of shoes that kind of look like they're a little bit Alabasta themed or something, which is kind of cute. I like that little reference in there to Vivi. But yeah, because, like, even Nojiko wouldn't want these shoes because, like, again, Nojiko works on in a tangerine orchard. She has to be able to run around and be on her feet all day for all of that stuff. So again, Nami doesn't really have friends that don't need shoes like that. Even, like, the Kuja. To be fair, Nami hasn't really interacted with the Kuja, but still, same idea. And what ends up happening is the designer, Lebno, shows up, and he ends up making an exception for Nami because she's, like, essentially, she's, like, criticizing him. She's like, you sell shoes and they're not what they're supposed to be. And he actually ends up agreeing to have her get a brand new pair of custom made heels made for her. And he actually at one point tries to, like, reach over and, like, pet Nami's face, and she just, like, backs away because she is creeped out by him. And Nami has had to put up with her more than necessary fair share of creeps in her life. Arlong never did that, but still not good. And then down the line, when she's having to like con a lot of men out of their money and stuff like that to rob them, she had to put up with a lot of creeps probably during that time frame. And all of that. So we get a lot of that. So that's kind of implied there. And like Nami is pretty good when it comes to judging that type of a thing. She's like, yeah, no, you're not touching me. And what ends up happening is Levno likes Nami's, fire, her spark, her attitude. And he thinks she's beautiful, of course, because she is. And he agrees, okay, we will get you a custom pair of shoes that will be good fitted shoes. And you can pick a couple of other pairs of shoes from the store or whatever. But in exchange, you have to model those new shoes in our show tonight. And Nami agrees to this deal. Nami agrees. She, of course, intends to take so many pairs and she can sell them before they leave to sail off the island. Sail from the island, which is just funny. And Miyucha doesn't really like this idea because we kind of get into this a little bit later, but Miyucha doesn't like the idea of Nami kind of having this privilege because, like, no one else has had this privilege. Nami just walks in, complains, and because she's beautiful, is able to get Lebdo to agree to this. Nami is definitely like one of the stars of the story. Miyucha is the other star in this story, in this chapter. And I love it. And what ends up happening is, of course, so Nami agrees to this. So we get to the fitting room and, Nami is, they have like Nami, Miyucha is just like, Lebno is like, okay, Miyucha, you're going to do what you're supposed to. Get her all set and ready, get her the shoes, blah, 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 blah. And Lebno just kind of leaves. So Miyucha takes Nami back to the fitting room and, she's getting measurements on Nami's shoes. And this is where I think someone definitely went, Jun Asaka, who wrote this, either went and talked to someone who knows how to make shoes, or at least did a little bit of the research in how shoes are made, specifically how heels are made, because, they're talking about, having her, her feet measured and her ankles measured and all this other stuff to make sure that the shoes are going to be the right size for her, which is, of course, a good thing. That's the whole point of this, is to do that. And there's also this little side note in the fact that, like, Nami has, has like a cracked toenail from stubbing her toe, and Nami isn't even bothered by it. And she's like, oh yeah, well, I treated it, it's fine. And like, they have Chopper on the ship because Chopper. And, so Chopper would take care of that. But like, Nami has dealt with far worse than that before Chopper. So she's perfectly able to take care of herself. And Miyucha is kind of disturbed by that, by the fact that Nami's just so used to dealing with stubbed toes. And I think Nami does mention that she works on a ship. By the way, this entire time, none of these people are realizing who Nami is. She tells them her name. I'm Nami. But she doesn't, she's not like, I am Nami, cat burglar, Nami, navigator of the Straw Hat Pirates. The people on this island don't seem to pay that much attention to bounties or the bounty posters or anything like that. Because reasons. They may at least vaguely know who the Yonko are, but they're not really all that needed here. There is references to they have made deals with pirates before, but that's probably not where they have the pirates or the really fancy, really pretty pirate ladies coming into the office. To be fair, Bonnie is very beautiful. She could qualify for this and try to be a model, in whatever, be a kid model or be, for adult form model or whatever type of thing. So we kind of go over that, and Nami is kind of thinking, and she kind of points out that, she gets lots of cuts and bruises and everything, and scrapes. Well, that, never ending while you're, part of a pirate crew is what she's thinking, it's so that's never ending. And so we get that. And, so we have Miyucha is focusing in on getting all the measurements and everything else like that. And she's, as she's working, Nami is kind of thinking that Miyucha's, the way that she's acting is kind of similar to the way that Belmare would act when she was working on, all the sewing and everything like that she would do for Nami and Nojiko's clothing. We'll get back to Belmare in a second. While she's working, Miucha asks Nami what she would like the heels to look like. And, red is kind of one of the very good complementary colors for Nami because, of course, her hair is orange, that very fiery orange, and, red is a very good color for Nami. She's got, there's other contrasting colors. Nami also looks very good in blue, and there's lots of other colors that, of course, Nami looks very good in. But I believe that the heels that she doesn't end up with are red. And what ends up happening is, so Miucha's asking her, well, what do you want the shoes to look like? And one of the details that Nami asks for, which I like, is that she asks for a lion sunflower motif on the heels. That's supposed to be the reference back to, the outfit that we see Belmare sewing with, the lion sunflower roaring on, the little outfit that she was making for Nami. And so it's this reference back to Belmare there that I like that gets brought in there. Pays attention. And so that's kind of what Nami is thinking. And the story just goes on into detail, and we kind of shift into Miucha's perspective of her working on making the shoes. And yes, very good job on the research of either just talking to someone who actually makes shoes or just at least looking up the process of how heels are made. So very good research there because we get a bunch of technical terms and stuff like that. Let me see if I can find that one, maybe. And there's really great little adorable illustrations in there. I've been using them kind of in this video already a little bit for some of the characters. But here's this nice one of Miucha working on getting the heels measured for Nami and everything. And, we kind of have Miucha is working on getting the heels made, and she's very good at her job in regards to doing that. And we actually kind of get her little internal monologue about being happy to get to make shoes that are the quality of comfort that she had originally wanted to make when she first started working there, and that she knows how to make, but because of cost reasons, they've been cutting back on the comfort of the shoe to make the shoes more expensive by upping the whatever cost it is to produce them and have the really high quality material, even if it's not the best manufacturer. So we kind of have that. And, so we kind of get into, at one point in time, Miucha actually kind of thinks of Nami as very bewitching, which is kind of fun. And she also the bewitching is fun because, of course, Zora likes to call Nami a witch. The other thing is that, or one of the other bits is that, she compares Nami's beauty to a well-drawn sea chart, which is just funny because, of course, Nami is the navigator and the, frick, why can't I remember the name for cartographer and all of that stuff. For cartography and all of that stuff. And then she also, Nami reminds her of a panther, which, of course, Nami is kind of, animal that she's supposedly most similar to is a cat because she's a cat burglar. So we get that. We get it where, Miucha is working on getting the shoes all made and making them, comfortable and well crafted and everything for Nami. And Nami comes out and she's wearing kind of the dress that they want her to wear for the fashion show. And she's very impressed with Miucha's skills and she's complimenting her and everything about it. And then Nami asks Miucha, so why are you working under someone else? Why are you working under Lebno if you're so good at this? And in her shock at this and kind of her anger at the question, Miucha actually snaps one of the heels of the shoe, so she has to go back in and fix all of that. So this highlights how observant Nami is, which is one of the things Nami is very good at reading people. That is one of her skills. She has to have that as a thief in regards to choosing her mark and everything else like that. But it also is just Nami is just generally pretty good at reading people in, in general. Um, she could get, vibes off of someone. Like, she was kind of freaked out by Brooke and stuff like that when they first met him, and like them and Nami and Luffy and Frankie did not meet on the best of terms, different things like that. But, she generally is like a pretty good judge of character. And she's just also very observant, so I like that they point that there. This is also where they kind of point out that all of the different marks on Miucha's hands, for how much she tries to hide them. Like, she has, very beautifully done nails, but you can still see like the stains on her fingers from the different oils and dyes and stuff like that she would have to work with, and the polishes that she would have to work with while working on the shoes. And like how her hands still kind of smell like them a lot of the time. And like, we know, of course, Nami has like her tattoo on her left shoulder that she, of course, shows off with pride a lot of the time now, and like the scars underneath it and everything. We get that. Can I get an angle there? We have that. And of course, Nami knows what it's like to have like stains on her fingers and stuff like that from doing all of her maps and everything else like that. So we know that, and how much she gets like, little paper cuts from them and different things like that because of how much they mean to her. And her skills and everything else like that. So that's like this comparison there. And Nami, actually, in watching this, kind of compares Miucha to both Sanji and Frankie in regards to their passion and their talent in their craft. Because, of course, Sanji is a chef, and he has this amazing passion for being a chef, and his talent is in that. And then, of course, Frankie is, of course, the shipwright, carpenter, all of that stuff. And he has this amazing passion for it as well. And she's kind of thinking about that. I don't remember if that comparison is made out loud, but Nami at least makes the comparison in her head. And Nami, like, she's like just talking to Miucha while this is going on, and she's like, she disagrees with the way that Lebno's policies and stuff like that, and suggests that Miucha should make her own shoes if she doesn't like having to make these not as good pairs of shoes, just, that they're not good. And Miucha doesn't like this. And Nami's like, well, what's the worst? You're just going to get fired. And this also shifts in that Miucha reveals that she does admire Lebno, or at least she did, when she first started working there. But she is also... Nami pins it down that Miucha and Lebno are in a relationship. And it's brought up that Lebno has many girls that he leads on, and has like several girlfriends, including Miucha. And Nami's thinking that, says to Miucha that you should just go off on your own and like start your own business. And Miucha just disagrees. She doesn't want to deal with this, and she keeps fixing the heels. And Miucha makes these comments about like, I get to work at this amazing store, this, well-known brand. I am dating Lebno, all this stuff, and all my friends are jealous and everything. It's what I want. And Nami's like, is having your friends jealous of you enough just because of all of this? Is that enough to have you still want to work here? When you could go doing what you really want to do, regardless of how jealous your friends would be, type of thing. And we get this kind of internal dialogue from Miucha where she's thinking about how people like Lebno, who are raised and pampered and stuff like that in higher class, that they don't realize the plight of normal people. And she lumps Nami into this. To be fair, Miucha does not know who Nami is. And even if she did know that Nami was a pirate, she's not going to know Nami's backstory of everything that happened with growing up in poverty, with Belmare, love, but poverty, and in that situation, and then having to deal with Arlong and all of that stuff. So it's not like Miucha knows that. It's not like she can figure that out just by looking at Nami. Or just with this short conversation type of a thing. And so she kind of lumps Nami in with that because Nami is so beautiful, she's probably grown up with like this silver spoon in her mouth, and has been grown up getting whatever she wanted to handed to her on a silver platter. Not what happens. We know that. The reader knows that. But Miucha doesn't know that. So later that afternoon, it's now that evening, and Miucha has the shoes made. She gave them to Nami. Nami's going to be walking in the show and everything in Lebno's show. And Lebno and Miucha are at the venue to present Lebno's new collection of the heels and everything else like that. And they're seated there, and there's like celebrities and editors and buyers and actresses and royalty and artists and all this other stuff, and a bunch of Lebno's regular customers and everything else like that. And Miucha's happy to be in the audience because she's usually backstage working on stuff. And, now she's getting to sit next to Lebno and everything else like that. And she's dressed very nicely, specifically wearing a pair of, Lebno's shoes and everything else like that. And so we get that. And Lebno is kind of like, so Lebno kind of does two things here. First, he's talking about the fact that, my shoe brand is just going downhill. And like the more that he's complaining about it, like the better and better the brand keeps doing, but the quality keeps dropping. And he keeps getting angry because he had wanted it to be like this elite type of thing. Not like only elite people can wear the shoes, but like he's just very judgmental about this. And, he's like, the buyers don't care about comfort anymore just because I'm a name known around the world, so they're happy to wear the shoes no matter how much pain they're in. It's I can bear with it for the seniority or whatever that it gives me for the fact that I have these shoes, that I can afford these shoes type of a thing. And so he's not, he's like lounging in his own self-pity in that regard. And so he's just kind of wallowing in his own self-pity at that point in time. And, but he's like, but Nami is going to be this amazing model. She's so much better than any of the other models that are at this show. We'll be fine. It's not like the business is hurting for money necessarily, except on the back end, they do kind of keep making deals with pirates and stuff like that. Yeah, because that's a really good way to not let your business go under, is make deals with pirates. There's even a mention that like a lot of the jewelry that gets used in this show are jewelry that they got from pirates. So yeah, there's that. So, and Lebno essentially gives up on pride and chose commercialism. And Miucha kind of thinks about her dreams for making shoes and everything else like that. And so she's kind of swaying there. And then it's time for Nami to walk out. And they shift and the lights land on the stage. There have been like other models walking and now it's Nami's turn. And like the music just goes silent. There is like no noise during this moment. There's like no background noise or anything else like that. Nami walks out, and much to everybody's shock, including Miucha and Lebno, she is in the heels. She's still in the heels. But she's not in this like really fancy dress that they put her in. She is just in her regular, everyday clothes, very light makeup, and the shoes Miucha made as she's walking down the runway. Very confident and very comfortable in her own skin, because that is something that Nami very much is. Nami and Robin much more now, and Nami much more now, are very confident and comfortable in their own skin. And that comes from like the confidence that they get from being around the other crew and just what they've themselves have done and everything, their own skills and everything else like that. And like just all eyes are just looking at Nami. Like every single pair of eyes in this area are just looking at Nami. And it is just her natural beauty and her behavior. And it is elevating the fact that she is comfortable in these shoes that are just amazing. And she's in functional clothing and all this stuff. And it's just, it's going into Nami's, natural beauty type of thing. And this is something that, like, as readers, we are very aware of this. We've seen Nami from her, as I mentioned, in, like, beautiful art that Oda has drawn of, like, Nami and Robin, a bunch of the others in, like, these super fancy, gorgeous outfits. And then also in, just the more comfortable clothes that we see her in other parts of the series. We've also seen Nami at her worst, and we have seen Nami in the middle of battle where she is, covered in dirt and scratches and sometimes her own blood as she's fighting. And sometimes it's those moments that really show how beautiful Nami is, because she is fighting for whatever the cause is. And it's, it's a lot of that comes into play. And, so we kind of see that there. Nami's not on a battlefield here, but she is very comfortable and confident in her own skin. And Miuccia thinks in her head, how can anyone look so strong dressed so plainly? Because Miuccia is just so used to having to be around models and designers and having these amazing outfits all around her and these amazing shoes and all this other stuff. She's lived on this island possibly her whole life. And this is the culture she has been raised in, that the more confident and the stronger you are, that means the more amazing clothes and jewelry and shoes and stuff like that you are wearing is like the culture that she is in. And Nami is proving that culture wrong right now by just walking down this runway, just fully confident in her own skin. I tried to get a picture of it, and I just was not having a lot of luck with trying to get like the really good picture of Nami on the runway, finding it. But, Nami on the runway. And she just looks so confident in her own skin, because of course that's the way that Nami is. And she's just casual clothing, all of that stuff. Showing off herself. And, Nami gets to the end of the thing, turns, and walks back. Struts back. And goes back to the behind the scenes area. And, everybody is just kind of rendered silent at this point in time. And Lebno doesn't say anything. Miuccia jumps up and tries to run to the backstage. Stumbles because she's in their stupid shoes. Takes them off and runs back to go talk to Nami barefoot. And she finds Nami. And we have this great little thing that finishes up this kind of little journey here. And kind of where Miuccia will go for this. And Nami actually, they get to the dressing room or whatever. Miuccia finds Nami. And Nami actually apologizes to Miuccia for the fact that I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't want to wear the really fancy dress, but I knew that it was supposed to be showing off the shoes, and I just figured the best way to show off these shoes would be to have me in my, normal clothing and stuff like that, because that would work better. And Miuccia gets it, and, Miuccia, it kind of clicks, and Nami is complimenting the shoes and how comfortable they are and how great they felt and all this other stuff. And this great job that Miuccia did. And Miuccia just starts crying because she is not used to any of this type of flattery or anything like that from Lebno. Or from her friends or from others. She is just so not used to it. And she just starts crying because it's also this realization of I don't want to make these shoes anymore. That are beautiful, yes, but they're not comfortable, and they hurt the people who wear them. They make them, they put them in pain. So, Miuccia starts crying, and Nami just grabs her. And this kind of goes into the fact of, we saw this with Vivi when Vivi started crying, with Nami hugging Vivi. We've had moments where, when Nami and Robin are reunited after what happens in Enies Lobby, Nami is hugging Robin. I think we've had Nami comforting Tama. We've had Nami comforting the kids on Punk Hazard. And we've seen Robin comfort other people. Robin, I believe, comforts Rebecca at one point in time during Dressrosa. There's, a few other bits where we have, Nami or Robin comforting another girl or comforting each other. And what ends up happening is, of course, Nami's comforting Miuccia as she, slowly, eventually stops sobbing. And she's thanking Nami for her kindness, and everything else like that. And Miuccia gives Nami the keys to the store because they had agreed to let, Nami take a couple of pairs of shoes. So she gives Nami the keys. And then Miuccia has decided that, and she does this the next day, she quits her job with Lebno and she is going to start making her own shoes. And then there's an investigation because Lebno's jewelry store got robbed. all the jewelry got robbed out of the store and robbed from the show and everything. And it's just so funny. And it's just but Miuccia never mentions anything about giving Nami the keys or anything like that. And I think she finally put it together. And it's, there's kind of, there's several things that happen there. It's like, Nami, yes, robs them blind. Of course she does. But she also gave Miuja her self-confidence back and pointed her in the direction of, you can do what you want. You can make the shoes you want to make. Make the product you want to make far better than you are making it there. And you are good at it. And that'd be great. And so, before I finish this up, this is the section, this is the one that is going to be animated. They have already, there's like sketches that have been released and stuff like that. And I think there's some other sketches that go along with some of these that just kind of, show colored sketches of like what the different characters have been going, showing some of the characters and stuff like that. And there is going to be an animated version of this specific episode. There's a couple of changes in it. Robin's going to be a little more prominent in the episode than she is just here mentioned. And it's just this little, the shoe must go on for Nami is what it is. And, there's, it's going to be, I believe it's in June or July is when it's going to be out. And it's just like this nice little thing that they're doing to show off, to kind of, promote the books. Depending on how well it does, how popular it is, they may end up adapting the other stories, Robin and Vivi and Perona's stories and stuff like that. And then the ones that are in the other one, they may end up doing that throughout the course of it, depending on how popular they are, which I think would be fun. But this will definitely go up before that goes up. This will probably go up on a week where there's no chapter, but it was technically a chapter breakdown. So there we go. That was about as long as the chapter breakdowns tend to be for me. So, I thank you very much. The next one for this video series, whenever it comes out, will be the one about Robin. Because that's the next one in the little storybook. So that's what I have here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and go read the stories. They're very cute, and have a nice rest of your day. Bye.